Okay, so the next talk in this session is again by Kristian Tylén, this time presenting work together with Zahra Alinam and Cordula Vesper from the University of Aarhus in Denmark. And the talk is titled The Cultural Route to Conceptualization of Space.
Thank you, Jonas, and thank you to the organizers for this great event. Maybe I should just briefly mention that Zahra Alinam, who's a co-author here, is actually affiliated with the Tabriz University of Design and Urbanization in Iran, but that's a detail. So in this talk, I would like to address kind of the origins of conceptualization of space and how it's expressed in language. And I'm going to touch upon some of the topics that also have come up several times during this conference, and in particular maybe this morning in Albert Nguyen's talk. So there are different kind of ideas in literature about the very origin of conceptual structure, and one approach that we can identify in philosophy of language is the idea that our concepts actually has a life that is independent of any form of human cognition or biology, or that the concepts actually has an transcendental reality independent of humans. Often the kind of examples that are brought forth here are things like 2 + 2 is 4, no matter if we can kind of conceive of it or not, right? So that particular many concepts from math might have some kind of reality outside humans. Another idea is, of course, that there could be some kind of innate component to some of our concepts, right? So there could be this radical biologism, right? Yet, I guess possibly many of the people attending this conference would kind of be attracted to ideas about the origins of our concepts being kind of linked to experience and social interaction somehow. And I think this was partly what Albert Nguyen was pointing to this morning. There are, of course, various versions of this, but one reason to be attracted to these ideas that concepts are constituted by, you would say, experience and interaction is that can kind of account for some of the diversity we look across cultures and languages, right? So languages largely differ in the way that they construe the world. So if we have a scenario like this, we could construe it using an intrinsic frame of reference and saying that the pony is in front of the fan. We could also use a relative frame of reference and say that it's left of the fan, or we could use an absolute one. And different languages like select among these different possibilities, right? And might have a kind of a preference for one of them, even if all three of them possibly could work very fine. And interestingly, what we also observe in some of Asifa Majid's really cool work is that this can have consequences also for non-linguistic processes of cognition, right? So when presented with this particular stimulus, rotated and asked to reproduce it, we see that speakers of Dutch would tend to reproduce this that we would think of as the egocentric kind of version here, because it's reproduced relative to the perceiver's own body here, while speakers of Tzetal here would reproduce this configuration, which is kind of an absolute one. And that kind of correlates with the fact that we have these different frames of reference as kind of part of the linguistic repertoire. Now, another kind of, so here we see examples of how linguistic diversity can have kind of an impact also on non-linguistic cognition. Another kind of observation that are kind of been formalized recently is the idea that the very origin of diversity among languages might have some kind of relation to various ecological factors. This is sometimes referred to as the linguistic niche hypothesis, right? That there could be certain ecological, social, or environmental aspects of the context that could explain some of the linguistic variation that we see. Here I've just listed some random examples. They are all kind of a correlational nature. So a lot of studies have gone out and collected a lot of data and shown, kind of using a more correlational approach, that there are these kind of systematic relations between ecological factors and linguistic factors. However, when we use this approach, of course, we're always in the kind of we have some difficulties accounting maybe for and individuating the mechanisms that are at play here, because languages evolve in such a complex interrelation between many factors, right? So it's difficult to tell with great certainty if a particular factor can plausibly be the source of a particular linguistic structure. So therefore, I guess there could be room also to approach this from other methodological standpoints. And let's just kind of have a look first at the idea that is at play here. So one idea is that there might be salient features of the environments that we are situated in that you could say become a kind of external bias that because they are salient, right, would tend to grab our attention and have an effect on our kind of pre-linguistic conceptualizations. This means then that when we are in some context of situated language use, the kind of choice between one or another construal might be affected by this kind of bias that comes from experience itself, comes from the kind of context and the environment in which we communicate. However, as we kind of verbalize this bias, as it kind of gets inscribed into language, of course, it also contributes to directing the attention of our recipients to those particular salient features or at least potentials of the environment, right? So what happens here is that there's an initial bias that gets enhanced, right? And would then again you could say influence future language use towards a situation where we observe conventionalization and so on and so forth. Now, the first part of here is then what we call the linguistic niche hypothesis, the fact that there can be certain parts of the environment here that is reflected in linguistic structure. Notice that the second level here, the way that language use directs attention to those particular features, that is what we call linguistic relativity. And I guess the model here suggests that maybe this is actually part of one kind of dynamic process. It's not kind of two phenomenon here. Now, in order to kind of start tapping into the more mechanistic parts of this, I've done some work with Jonas, who is chairing this session. We took the maze game, which is a very simple kind of social coordination game. Actually, I think Greg Mills also might actually still be hanging out in the audience. He's also co-authoring this. But we took this maze game where people have to coordinate their positions in a maze. What has been observed earlier on is that as you play this game through repeated trials, people will start kind of conventionalizing particular ways of referring to positions in the maze, and this can kind of be formalized. And what we observe is that there are particular strategies that they kind of move away from. For instance, you could notify the other person about your whereabouts by reference to salient figurative details here of the maze, but that seems to be an strategy that people often would leave during the game in favor of more abstract strategies, kind of a chessboard-like scheme maybe. But what we did in our version of this task was that we put people into very different environments. Of course, this is a very simplified idea of an environment, but we had environments that were very irregular, some that were stratified to the extent that there was these kind of horizontal lines that would kind of constitute salient aspects of these particular environments, and then we would have these very regular conditions. And what we observed there was that actually that affected the way that people would speak about or talk about their whereabouts in these mazes. So we would have very different linguistic strategies here. This, of course, is what we would think of as a case of horizontal transmission, right? We had just people solving this in isolated pairs. Moving on, the current study here is trying to do this, but in a slightly richer way. So we ask here if different urban environments may provide different salient cues that would aid spatial navigation, and as they have to give instructions to other people in how to find things in these environments, they might get reflected in their route descriptions. And then as people are giving repeated route descriptions to new people, we might see that those initial biases that comes from the environment kind of get enhanced as they are, you could say, find expression or are kind of verbalized in route descriptions. Perhaps by the end they are conventionalized. So basically what we do here is that we manipulate features of the environment, and then we go and look at how people verbalize in like spatial instructions that they give to people, other people, and then we again look at how those instructions might enhance the bias in some sense, or enhance the extent to which people attend to those particular features. And here we use virtual reality. So we create different environments. Here is what we call the Manhattan condition. For the participant, it looks something like this. They walk around here with a VR headset. The environment itself consists of these very kind of straight perpendicular streets, and the buildings, they have some texture, but it's kind of desaturated texture. And this becomes clear when we compare it then to what we call the Barcelona condition. Here we have exactly the same map as for the Manhattan condition, but we kind of twirled the streets and then we saturated the textures here. So we have two different environments, one that is characterized by a lot of regularity, and one that is characterized by, you could say, texture and saturation here. Here's just kind of a small demonstration of what it could look like. This is a video generated not in the using the VR set, but just run on a regular computer. So it's a little bit kind of laggy, but it can give you some kind of idea of what it looks like when you are going in here in this environment and searching for a particular target object. Now let's visit some hypotheses here, right? So the idea is that in the Manhattan condition, we might observe that the streets becomes kind of figure against the buildings that are ground, because they have these kind of certain properties. They are very straight and perpendicular. They might kind of come to constitute the foreground. So the idea is here that maybe people would attend more to what we could think of as the horizontal structure of the cityscape in the Manhattan condition, while when they are in the Barcelona condition, we might see that they become more attentive to the vertical structures, which would have textures and color, and also because the streets actually here in the Barcelona condition would be more twirled and thereby maybe harder to kind of pick up as a structure. The way we design this task is that people have to come into the lab. They have to go into a virtual environment, either the Manhattan or the Barcelona one, and find this flower here. So we call it sometimes the bee dance paradigm. So first, the participant has to go and find the target. Then when they come out again, find their way back, they have to write an instruction to the next participant that would help assist this participant in finding the target at this particular position in the cityscape. They also have to draw a map, and I'll come back to that. And what happens then when the next participants come into the lab is that they would read the instruction and go and try to find the target at that previous position in the cityscape. Then afterwards, they would be presented with a new target that they have to find write instruction, draw a map, and so on and so forth. And this continues over 6 generations. And 2 different conditions, of course. So we have some participants only taking the Manhattan and some only taking Barcelona here. What we're interested in is the nature of their route descriptions here. So we code these for references to color and texture and number words, for instance, vertical landmarks and horizontal landmarks. And we kind of group these together in 2 summary conceptualizations. So we believe that to the extent that people would use a lot of numbers, of course, we check this, we believe that that is situations where they would tend to be attracted to the horizontal layout of the city. So they would say, oh, the third street on your left, and so on and so forth. If they use more of the color and texture words and vertical landmark words, we would characterize them as being, you could say, conceptualizing the cityscape more in terms of the vertical structures. We also so we coded all these words, and then we had a kind of an automatic algorithm classifying the descriptions. We also looked at the maps that they were drawing, and we coded these for using the very same type of coding scheme. And then we also measured the time that participants took to find the target when following the instructions. Yeah, here are some results here. So what we observe is that when people are included in the Barcelona condition, that is when they are put into a cityscape that is characterized by winded streets but very colorful buildings, we observe that they would tend to use those particular route descriptions that that favor the vertical constructions, and we see that they do that to a higher and higher extent through the different generations here. So actually initially it's not really clear that there's a particular kind of bias here, but as we move through the generation by generation, we observe that that people become more and more attentive to those particular cues in favor of the horizontal cues. We don't have as clear a pattern for the Manhattan condition. We do see some kind of main effect here, more tendency to rely on horizontal cues, and we can kind of break it up and look at something like color here that is more emphasized in the Barcelona condition, less so in the Manhattan. Vertical landmarks more emphasized in again here in the Barcelona than the Manhattan, and so on and so forth. When we look at the map drawings, we see actually a quite clear double dissociation, right? Again, following the same pattern here. And this suggests that maybe what we're observing here is not just kind of a surface linguistic phenomenon, right, where people prime each other, because these drawings are actually not transmitted. They just draw them once based on the experiences here. And we see again more and more attention to vertical structures in the Barcelona condition and to horizontal structures in the Manhattan condition. Interestingly, and this was not part of the pre-registered predictions, we actually observed that the extent to which participants actually use vertical structures in the Barcelona condition actually seems to have an effect on how fast the next participant is able to find the target. So if you produce a description that you could say match up with the kind of salient properties of the environment, your recipient is also able to find that target faster. And we see that it's kind of double dissociation again through both of these, even if the results are not super strong. I think that's quite interesting that it has this kind of functional element to it. So let's sum up here. So participants' route descriptions, they differed in the 2 environmental conditions. So in the Barcelona conditions, they would more often refer to salient properties of that environment, which means vertical structures, building colors and textures, and so on and so forth. In the Manhattan condition, they would refer more to the horizontal layout, streets, intersections, the numbers of streets, and so on and so forth. But more importantly, we observe that these effects are modulated over cultural transmission, so that the fact that you receive a particular description seems to, you could say, enhance this initial subtle bias that is built into your environment, so that actually people start to a higher and higher extent to rely on those particular cues. This is kind of the, you could say, the linguistic relativity part of the observation, right? And this is also replicated when we use the map drawings, which are actually not transmitted, but it can show us something about the extent to which these are actually, you could say, it could be an indication that this is not just a kind of a very superficial linguistic phenomenon, but it's actually something that links us to the actual representations of our participants. We also see this this functional aspect here, which I found really interesting. So on a more kind of theoretical level, we find that the environment presents affordances for particular conceptualizations, or kind of seem to embody biases for particular conceptualizations that we can think of as environmental biases, and these gets reflected in language when people have to use language situated in these environments, but also that they are enhanced by social transmission as language selectively direct the attention of the recipient to those particular cues. And that kind of reinforces the biases. And that was all. I would like to acknowledge my co-authors here, Zahra Alinam. So you might wonder why we chose urban environments, but that was because Zahra has a degree in urban design and was interested in that. Also, Cordula Vesper, my close colleague here at the Aarhus University. And with that, I would like to say thank you.